The first person to notice something was wrong wasn't an engineer. It was a farmer. 3 days after the rebuilt forage harvester was delivered, it sat untouched in a storage yard outside a large agricultural processing facility in Iowa. The machine had been tested. It worked perfectly. Every report confirmed it, yet nobody wanted to operate it. Managers couldn't understand why. The machine represented millions of dollars in lost production that had finally been recovered. It should have been a success story. Instead, experienced operators kept finding excuses. "I'll take another unit. Give me a different machine. Not that one." At first, management assumed the workers were being difficult. Then they learned the truth. Word had spread, and the reason had a name: Marcus Reed, 46 years old, a widowed farmer, a father, and one of the most gifted mechanical minds in 3 counties. At that moment, Marcus was nowhere near the facility. He was standing in a muddy field behind his farmhouse, repairing an irrigation pump while his 16-year-old daughter Emily handed him tools. The autumn wind rolled across the countryside. Marcus wiped grease from his hands and smiled as Emily complained about her math homework. For a few minutes, life felt normal. But normal had been hard to find since his wife Sarah died 5 years earlier. Cancer had taken her far too young. One day she was helping Emily prepare for school. A year later she was gone. The loss had nearly broken Marcus. For months he barely spoke. Neighbors worried about him. But every morning he looked at Emily and reminded himself that giving up wasn't an option. His daughter needed a father, so he kept moving. He farmed during the day, repaired equipment at night, and slowly built a reputation few people could match. When machines failed, people called Marcus. When dealerships gave up, people called Marcus. When experts said something couldn't be repaired, people called Marcus. He never advertised. He never bragged. The work spoke for itself. That reputation was exactly why Harvest Core Industries contacted him 8 months earlier. Their massive forage harvester had suffered catastrophic damage during a transport accident. Several consulting firms examined it. Each reached the same conclusion. The machine was beyond economical repair. Replacement would cost millions. Repairing it would take a miracle. Then someone mentioned Marcus Reed. The company representatives drove out to his farm expecting an old mechanic with a small workshop. Instead, they found a quiet farmer feeding cattle. They almost laughed. One executive later admitted that he thought the meeting was a waste of time. Marcus listened to their explanation, asked questions, reviewed photographs, studied technical documents, then calmly said something nobody else had: "I think I can fix it." The room went silent. The executives exchanged looks. Every expert they had hired said it was impossible. Yet this farmer seemed completely unfazed. One of them asked, "How sure are you?" Marcus shrugged. "Machines tell you what they need if you listen long enough." The answer sounded ridiculous. But desperation made people willing to take chances. A contract was signed, a payment agreement was established, and Marcus began the hardest project of his life. For 8 months he worked before sunrise and after sunset. He missed weekends, skipped holidays, spent countless nights in his workshop. Emily often found him asleep in a chair surrounded by diagrams and tools. She worried about him. But Marcus always smiled. It'll be worth it. He believed that. The payment would help pay for Emily's future education. It would finally provide breathing room after years of financial struggle. Every sacrifice had a purpose. Every long night had meaning. What Marcus didn't know was that while he was rebuilding the machine, certain executives inside Harvest Core were already discussing ways to avoid paying him. And by the time the forage harvester roared back to life, their plan was already in motion. Marcus was about to learn a painful lesson. Some people admired skill, others only looked for opportunities to exploit it. He had no idea which kind he had been working for. Not yet. But he was about to find out. 8 months of work came down to a single moment. Marcus stood inside Harvest Core's maintenance facility as the rebuilt forage harvester prepared for its first full test. Engineers, managers, and company executives gathered around, watching closely. Many of them had doubted him. Some had openly said the machine would never run again. Marcus ignored all of it. His attention stayed on the machine. After hundreds of repairs, thousands of adjustments, and countless sleepless nights, this was the moment that mattered. An operator turned the key. The massive engine rumbled. For a second, nobody moved. Then the machine came alive. Every system responded exactly as it should. Hydraulics worked smoothly. The cutting mechanisms performed perfectly. The control systems showed no fault. The giant forage harvester operated as if it had just left the factory. Silence filled the building. Then applause erupted. Even the engineers who had doubted Marcus looked stunned. One manager shook his head. "I honestly didn't think it was possible." Marcus simply smiled. The machine wasn't just repaired. It was better than anyone expected. For the first time in months, he felt relief. He thought about Emily. The payment from this project would help with college savings. It would allow them to fix parts of the farmhouse that had been neglected for years. Most importantly, it meant that all those sacrifices had been worth something. A week later, Marcus drove to Harvest Corps headquarters for the final paperwork. He expected a routine meeting. Instead, he walked into a trap. 3 executives sat across from him. No smiles, no congratulations, no gratitude. The atmosphere felt cold. One executive slid a folder across the table. After reading the first page, Marcus frowned. The agreed payment wasn't there, not even close. "We've decided not to approve the original amount," the executive said calmly. Marcus looked up. "What do you mean?" The man folded his hands. "Our internal review concluded that company personnel contributed significantly to the restoration." Marcus stared at him in disbelief. That wasn't true. Most of the work had been done by him alone. Another executive spoke. "We're offering a much smaller settlement. The amount was insulting. It wouldn't even cover the expenses Marcus had invested into the project." For several seconds, nobody spoke. The executives seemed confident. They expected anger. They expected shouting, maybe even desperation. Instead, Marcus slowly closed the folder. "You gave your word," he said quietly. The room remained silent. Then one executive shrugged. "Business is business." Marcus stood up. His face showed disappointment, but not rage. "You'll save money today," he said, "but it'll cost you more than you think." Without another word, he walked out. The executives watched him leave and laughed. To them, he was just a farmer, a man with no power, a man they believed nobody would listen to. They couldn't have been more wrong, because in farming communities, reputation was worth more than contracts, and news traveled fast. Marcus didn't file a lawsuit. He didn't go to the media. He didn't post angry messages online. When he returned home from Harvest Corps headquarters, he simply went back to work. The next morning, he was feeding cattle before sunrise as if nothing had happened. Emily noticed the change immediately. Her father was quiet, not angry, just disappointed. That evening, while they sat at the kitchen table, she finally asked, "Did they pay you?" Marcus looked at his daughter for a moment before answering. "No." Emily stared at him. "What do you mean, no?" He explained everything, the contract, the excuses, the reduced offer, the refusal to honor their agreement. By the time he finished, Emily's eyes were full of frustration. "That's not fair." "No," Marcus agreed, "it isn't. You should fight them." Marcus took a sip of coffee. Maybe Emily expected more. Instead, he calmly said, "The kind of people who do things like this eventually create their own problems." At the time, she didn't understand what he meant, but she soon would. A few days later, Marcus visited a local equipment supplier for replacement parts. The owner, an old friend named Bill Harper, noticed something was bothering him. After some gentle questioning, Marcus explained what had happened. Bill was speechless. "They really did that?" Marcus nodded. Bill shook his head. "That's a mistake." Marcus simply paid for his parts and left. He never asked Bill to tell anyone. But farming communities have always operated differently than big corporations. People talk, people remember, and people pay attention to character. Within a week, farmers across multiple counties had heard the story, not exaggerated versions. The truth. A widowed farmer had spent 8 months rebuilding a machine that everyone else had abandoned. Then the company refused to pay him. The story spread from coffee shops to equipment dealerships, from repair garages to grain elevators. Everywhere people gathered, Marcus's name came up. Most weren't surprised by his work. They were surprised by Harvest Corps' behavior. Then the story reached something even more important. Experienced machine operators. Many of them had worked with Marcus over the years. They knew his reputation, they trusted his judgment, and they respected the way he treated people. One operator named Rick Lawson was scheduled to run the rebuilt forage harvester during a demonstration event. The night before the event, he heard what had happened. The next morning, a manager handed him the assignment. Rick looked at the paperwork, then handed it back. "I'm not running that machine." The manager frowned. "Why not?" "Because the man who rebuilt it got cheated." The manager laughed. "That's not your concern." Rick looked him straight in the eye. "It is now." Elsewhere, another operator reached the same decision, then another, and another. Nobody organized a protest. Nobody issued demands. There was no campaign, no leader, just dozens of hard-working people making the same personal choice. If Marcus Reed's work wasn't worth respecting, neither was the machine built from it. At first, Harvest Corps executives dismissed the situation. They assumed a few stubborn operators would eventually give in. But as more refusals arrived, concern began spreading through the company. For the first time, the people who had ignored Marcus's dignity were starting to realize something important. Trust wasn't a resource that could be purchased, and once lost, it was very difficult to get back. If you're enjoying this story, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to Farmer Dignity Stories for more inspiring farmer stories from around the world. Also, let us know where you're watching from. It's always amazing to see our Farmer Dignity Stories family growing across different countries and communities. At first, Harvest Corps executives treated the refusals as a minor inconvenience. A few operators declined assignments, a few contractors asked questions, nothing serious, at least that's what they told themselves. But within weeks, the problem grew. The rebuilt forage harvester was supposed to be the centerpiece of several demonstrations across the Midwest. The company had invested heavily in marketing campaigns, customer events, and promotional materials. Yet everywhere the machine went, the same issue appeared. Experienced operators didn't want anything to do with it. Some politely declined, others openly explained why. The machine isn't the problem. The company is. That answer began appearing again and again. Managers found themselves scrambling to replace operators at the last minute. Even when replacements were found, potential customers kept hearing the story. Why was everyone avoiding a machine that supposedly worked perfectly? The question spread faster than the company's explanations. Soon, local agricultural publications began hearing rumors. Dealership owners started making phone calls, farmers started asking questions, and every conversation eventually led back to one name: Marcus Reed. Meanwhile, Marcus continued living his life. Every morning he worked on his farm. Every evening he spent time with Emily. He never encouraged the backlash. In fact, whenever someone called to discuss the situation, he tried changing the subject. His goal wasn't revenge. He simply wanted to be treated fairly. One afternoon, Emily showed him an online article discussing the controversy. The article questioned whether Harvest Corps had treated an independent contractor honestly. Marcus read it quietly before setting his phone down. "You should be happy," Emily said. "They're finally getting what they deserve." Marcus looked out the window toward the fields. After a long pause, he shook his head. "No," Emily frowned. "Why not?" "Because when people focus on revenge, nobody really wins." She didn't fully understand. Most teenagers wouldn't. From her perspective, the company had hurt her father. Seeing them struggle felt justified. But Marcus viewed things differently. He knew anger had a way of growing if people fed it. He had learned that lesson after losing Sarah. Bitterness could consume a person if they allowed it. Across the state, Harvest Corps' leadership was learning a different lesson. Trust had value, and they had underestimated it. Internal reports showed increasing losses. Several demonstration events underperformed. Potential buyers delayed purchases. Partners began expressing concerns about the company's reputation. During one executive meeting, tensions finally boiled over. "This is getting out of control," one manager said. "We should have settled this months ago." Another executive slammed a folder onto the table. "All this because of one farmer?" "No," another replied. "All this because people trusted that farmer more than they trust us." The room fell silent. Nobody wanted to admit it, but everyone knew it was true. Marcus Reed had something Harvest Corps couldn't manufacture. A reputation built over decades, a reputation earned through honesty. And now that reputation was costing them millions. For the first time, the executives who had dismissed him began asking a question they should have asked from the beginning. Had refusing to pay Marcus Reed become the most expensive decision they had ever made? 3 months after refusing to pay Marcus Reed, Harvest Corp finally decided to act. The company had lost contracts. Demonstration events continued to struggle. Customers kept delaying purchases. Most frustrating of all, the controversy refused to disappear. Every attempt to move past it only brought more attention to the story. Desperate for a solution, the board of directors ordered 2 senior representatives to visit Marcus personally. Their instructions were simple: fix the problem. The representatives arrived at Marcus's farm on a cool Saturday morning. They expected to find him in a workshop. Instead, they found him repairing a fence while Emily carried supplies nearby. The sight caught them off guard. This was the man who had caused so much trouble for a multi-million-dollar company. He looked like an ordinary farmer, mud on his boots, dust on his shirt, nothing remarkable. Yet somehow he had become the center of a growing crisis. Marcus greeted them politely. No hostility, no sarcasm, just simple courtesy. After a few minutes of awkward conversation, one representative finally got to the point. "We'd like to resolve the situation." Marcus leaned against the fence post. "I'm listening." The man handed him a document. Inside was a financial offer. It was significantly larger than the amount Harvest Corp had offered months earlier. In fact, it exceeded the original contract. Emily's eyes widened. The amount could change their lives. The representative seemed confident. Surely Marcus would accept. After all, wasn't this what he wanted? Marcus carefully reviewed the paperwork. Then he closed the folder. "You should have honored your agreement the first time." The representatives exchanged nervous glances. "We're trying to make things right." "No," Marcus replied calmly. "You're trying to make the problem go away." The words landed hard, because everyone knew they were true. If the public backlash had never happened, Harvest Corp would never have returned. The company wasn't motivated by fairness. It was motivated by pressure. One representative sighed. "What do you want from us?" Marcus looked toward the field stretching beyond his property. For several moments nobody spoke. Then he answered. "I wanted honesty." The visitors had no response. "You treated my work like it had value when you needed it," Marcus continued. "Then acted like it didn't once the machine was fixed." The silence became uncomfortable. Even Emily could see that the representatives felt ashamed. Finally, Marcus handed the folder back. "I'm not interested in private deals." The men stared at him. "You won't accept the money?" Marcus shook his head. "Not like this." The representatives looked stunned. Most people would have taken the offer immediately, but Marcus wasn't trying to maximize profit. He was protecting something more important: his integrity. As the meeting ended, one representative asked a final question. "If money won't solve this, what will?" Marcus thought about it. Then he gave a simple answer: "The truth." The visitors drove away without an agreement. For the first time, Harvest Corp's leadership understood the depth of their mistake. The issue was no longer about a contract. It was about trust. And trust couldn't be bought back with a check. It had to be earned, the hard way. Harvest Corp's leadership hoped the failed meeting with Marcus would stay private. It didn't. Within days, rumors spread that company representatives had visited his farm carrying a large settlement offer. People immediately began asking the same question. If Harvest Corp had done nothing wrong, why were they suddenly offering more money than the original contract? The company had no good answer. Then things got worse. A former Harvest Corp executive named Daniel Mercer stepped forward. Daniel had retired 6 months earlier and no longer had any reason to protect the company. For months, he had watched the situation unfold with growing frustration. He knew exactly what had happened, because he had been in the room when the decision was made. One evening, during an interview with an agricultural trade publication, Daniel told the truth. According to him, several executives had discussed reducing Marcus's payment long before the restoration was complete. Internal projections showed the company was under financial pressure. Someone suggested renegotiating after the work was finished. Someone else suggested paying only a fraction of the agreed amount. The idea should have been rejected immediately. Instead, it gained support. Daniel admitted he argued against it, but he was outvoted. They thought he had no leverage, he said during the interview. They saw a farmer working alone and assumed nobody would care. The article spread rapidly. Farmers shared it. Equipment operators shared it. Dealership owners shared it. Everything Marcus had claimed was suddenly backed by someone from inside the company. The public reaction was immediate. People who had been unsure now had proof. The problem wasn't a misunderstanding. It wasn't a contract dispute. It was a deliberate decision. Meanwhile, Marcus was repairing a tractor engine when Bill Harper called. "Have you seen the news?" Marcus hadn't. Bill explained everything after the call ended. Marcus read the article himself. Emily sat beside him. "They finally exposed themselves," she said. Marcus nodded quietly. He felt no excitement, no sense of victory, only sadness. A decision made by a few executives had damaged countless relationships. Employees were suffering. Dealers were struggling. Customers were frustrated, all because somebody had chosen greed over honesty. At Harvest Corps headquarters, panic spread. Board members demanded emergency meetings. Investors wanted explanations. Several executives blamed one another. The same people who once laughed when Marcus walked out of their office were now fighting to save their own positions. By the end of the week, 2 senior executives resigned. Another was placed under investigation. But even that wasn't enough. The company still faced a larger problem. People no longer trusted them, and trust was harder to rebuild than any machine. As pressure mounted, Harvest Corps' board reached a conclusion they could no longer avoid. The company needed to publicly acknowledge what happened, not through lawyers, not through private negotiations, but openly. The board prepared an announcement that could change everything. For the first time since the controversy began, Harvest Corps was preparing to admit that Marcus Reed had been right all along. The announcement came on a Monday morning. Harvest Corps released a public statement admitting that Marcus Reed had been treated unfairly. The company acknowledged that the original payment agreement should have been honored and accepted responsibility for the decisions that led to the controversy. For many people, the statement was shocking. For others, it was long overdue. But the biggest surprise came at the end. Harvest Corps invited Marcus to attend a public event where the company planned to formally apologize and present the full compensation owed to him. The invitation quickly became the talk of farming communities across the region. Everyone wanted to know one thing. Would Marcus accept? Emily certainly had an opinion. "They owe you this," she said, while helping her father load feed bags. Marcus smiled. "They do. And after everything they put you through, I hope they have to stand there and admit it." Softly, his daughter had inherited her mother's strong sense of justice. A week later, the event took place at a large agricultural expo attended by farmers, operators, dealers, and industry leaders. The crowd was larger than anyone expected. Many came out of curiosity. Others came out of respect for Marcus. When he arrived, people greeted him warmly. Handshakes, smiles, words of encouragement. Marcus accepted them all with humility. Soon, the company's chairman stepped onto the stage. The room became silent. For several minutes, he explained the company's mistakes. He admitted that Marcus's work had saved the forage harvester. He admitted the company had failed to honor its commitment. Most importantly, he apologized directly. Not through lawyers, not through carefully crafted legal language, but as one person speaking to another. Then he handed Marcus a check representing the full amount owed, along with additional compensation approved by the board. The audience applauded. Many expected Marcus to give a triumphant speech. Some expected him to criticize the company. Others hoped he would publicly embarrass the executives responsible. Instead, Marcus stepped to the microphone and surprised everyone. "I accept the apology," he said. The room became completely quiet. "I didn't come here because I wanted revenge." His voice remained calm. "I came because agreements matter. Honesty matters. The way we treat people matters." Many people nodded. They knew he was right. Marcus looked toward the crowd. "If we only do the right thing when it's easy, then our values don't mean much." The words struck deep. Even the Harvest Corps employees listening from the back of the room lowered their heads. Then Marcus said something Emily would never forget. "People make mistakes, companies make mistakes. What matters is whether we're willing to admit them and make things right." The applause that followed was louder than anything heard that day. As Emily watched her father leave the stage, she finally understood something important. Strength wasn't found in anger. It wasn't found in revenge. Real strength was having every reason to be bitter and choosing dignity instead, and that choice earned Marcus even more respect than the machine he had rebuilt. 1 year later, The old farmhouse looked different. The roof had been repaired. The porch had been rebuilt. And for the first time in years, Marcus Reed no longer worried about whether a single unexpected expense would push them into debt. After the public apology, Harvest Corps honored every commitment it made. The company also created a new contractor ethics policy and quietly named a scholarship program for young agricultural mechanics after Marcus. Marcus never asked for any of that. He accepted the payment he had earned, invested most of it into the farm, and set aside money for Emily's education. Life returned to something close to normal. That was exactly how he wanted it. On a warm autumn afternoon, Marcus stood beside a field of corn while Emily helped load tools into the truck. She was preparing to leave for college in a few weeks. "Nervous?" he asked. "A little." "That's normal." She leaned against the truck and looked at him. "Dad, can I ask you something?" "Always." "When they cheated you, were you ever tempted to hate them?" Marcus thought for a moment. "I was hurt," he admitted, "and I was disappointed, but hate is heavy. If you carry it long enough, it starts hurting you more than the people you're angry at." Emily was quiet. He continued, "Your mother used to say that character shows up when life becomes unfair. Anybody can be kind when things are easy." Emily smiled. "That sounds like Mom." "It does." As the sun lowered over the fields, Marcus realized something surprising. He no longer thought about the money. He no longer thought about the executives. What mattered most was the lesson his daughter had learned. She had watched him lose, struggle, and be treated unfairly, but she had also watched him refuse to become bitter. That was the real inheritance he was leaving behind. A few days later, Emily left for college to study agricultural engineering. Before driving away, she hugged her father tightly. "I want to build things that help people," she said, "and I want to be the kind of person people can trust." Marcus smiled. "Then you'll do just fine." As her car disappeared down the country road, Marcus stood quietly beside the mailbox and felt something he hadn't felt in a long time. Peace. The machine he rebuilt would eventually be replaced. The headlines would be forgotten. But the lesson would remain. From this story we learn that respect can be demanded by power, but trust must be earned through honesty, integrity, and the way we treat others. Marcus Reed could have chosen revenge, anger, and bitterness. Instead, he chose dignity, patience, and character. In the end, those qualities became more valuable than money. We also learn that doing the right thing may not bring immediate rewards, but it builds a reputation that no one can take away. And when life becomes unfair, our response reveals who we truly are. That is the lesson this story gives us. Real strength is not winning at all costs. It is keeping your integrity even when others lose theirs. That's it for today. I'd love to hear from you. Tell me in the comments which part of this story touched you the most or what lesson you learned from it. Thank you for watching and supporting the channel. See you in the next story.